It's time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you saying, "By George, I think he's got it." Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome back into another podcast by George. We're back here after the big DeCaf show. You know, I did a podcast on that already, and I mentioned that I had a couple of guests lined up. We were going to do some interviews here on News of the Day, and of course, our friend, the good doctor, was going to make another house call here on podcast by George, Dr. Andrew Nish, and that was kind of set aside when all my power went out. He had some trees blow down, and I mean, it's been bad ever since, and to get into this today, a lot of people want to know why I do the podcast. Well, so I can inform folks and, try to do a little bit here to give back. And also so I can talk to folks like Dr. Nish, but also frustration's a part of it. You saw that in the DeCaf show coverage that I had. Do you know that 75,000 Iowans are still without power this morning? And this is a small state. 75,000 is a lot of people, and being without power is a big deal, particularly in a rural state, because a lot of people in the boonies are still on well systems, and they don't have water, they don't have electricity. They don't have electricity, they don't have water because of the wells. And even I didn't have a sewer system for a while because it's hooked to electricity. It's a big deal, folks, and they're not talking about it much. There's not as much coverage as you would think. The front page of the paper this morning didn't have anything on it. The local television station should have continuous color-coded maps updating the progress. Every house that blinks on should come on this map. My God, we do it with these electoral maps that we have for the presidential elections. Why can't we do it for power outages? Congress went on vacation, of course. My God, that frustrates me. I can't believe that those guys just go home with everything that's affecting the country and so many people facing eviction from their homes and living on substandard unemployment benefits. Yeah, they can't get anything done. They just pick up and leave. Donald Trump's brother died, and the obituaries don't even mention a cause of death. Now, this has been a thing. Nobody talks about this. I've been bitching about this for years. The obituary should have a cause of death for people. Why? You need to know what people are dying from. I mean, I get the privacy thing to a certain extent, but this is a perfect example. If there's a pandemic going on, you need to know why people are dying. I want to know if Trump's brother died of COVID-19. I don't think he did, but I don't know because it's not included in there. I mean, that's something that we need to include. It's public information. It needs to be in the coverage. And so that got me going this morning. It got me frustrated. And then you hear the doc laughing in the background.
Hey, George, let me say something. Let me say something about the obituary. There was a study done a number of years ago in the New England Journal of Medicine. And if you looked at death certificates, about half of them were wrong as far as cause of death. So, you can say what we think people died of, but half the time we're probably wrong.
Well, that plays a role in this COVID thing, because a lot of people believe with coronavirus that those death certificates are not accurate, particularly the people that don't believe in the statistics that we're getting. They think that coronavirus is being cited as a cause of death when it actually isn't. But I always thought that the doctors and the medical practitioners had to do the best that they could because their licenses are at stake when it comes to listing that cause of death. Now, they could be wrong. Well, anybody could be wrong, but they got to try to be right.
Well, they are trying to be right. But when you compare the cause of death and then compare it with the autopsy, we're wrong in about half of cases. No matter how, do you know if someone died of a heart attack versus a pulmonary embolus? That's a very difficult distinction. Just because somebody had COVID-19, did they truly die of the virus, or did their heart just give out secondary to the fact that they were under all this physiologic stress? That is a very, very difficult thing to do without actual autopsies. So.
Yeah. All right,
now we got to get you some deep breathing this morning, George.
I know.
We got to take a deep breath here, man.
I always feel better after I talk to you, particularly, and I just wanted to wrap up this little rant intro that I had with this AP story. And it's connected. President Donald Trump has found a new doctor for his coronavirus task force, and this time there's no daylight between them, the AP says. Trump last week announced that Dr. Scott Atlas, a frequent guest on the Fox News channel, has joined the White House as a pandemic advisor. Atlas, the former chief of neuroradiology at Stanford University Medical Center and a fellow at Stanford's conservative Hoover Institution, he has no expertise in public health or infectious diseases, but he's been a long critic of coronavirus lockdowns and has campaigned for kids to return to the classroom and for the return of college sports, just like Trump. Now, here's what Trump says. This is our president of the United States. This drives me crazy, too. This is our quote. This is how this guy talks. Trump says, Scott is a very famous man who's also very highly respected. Trump told reporters as he introduced the edition, he has many great ideas, and he thinks what we've done is really good. Honest to God, that's something a kid would say. And that's what the president of the United States says when he's introducing this new guy that's going to be the pandemic advisor to the White House, because he agrees with what the president has to say. And of course, and I guess maybe this will lead into you, Doc. He's a big proponent of this herd immunity thing. He's one of these people that's kind of intimated that he believes it's better if young people in particular go ahead and get the virus so that they can get immune to it. And so the numbers of affected people go down and herd immunity. Is that real with coronavirus? Is that something that will help us if we can achieve that, or can we?
Well, number one, you have to look at, okay, how many people have currently been infected in the United States? And we think maybe 10% of the population. It's going up every day. It's been estimated by our epidemiology folks that in order to acquire herd immunity in this country, it's going to take 70 to 80% of the population to become infected. So we're a long, long way from herd immunity. There's two ways to get herd immunity, obviously. One is to acquire the virus and go through the illness and acquire that immunity. The second way is through a vaccination. We don't have a vaccination. But to think in the next 6 to 12 months we're going to acquire herd immunity through infection, I think is not really possible unless we are willing to have hundreds of thousands of more people die.
Well,
and that's the trade-off.
Why don't we have herd immunity with the common cold? Why don't we have it with the flu? Why don't we have it with polio? Why is it a potential?
Well, polio was wiped out years ago because of the vaccine. So we do have herd immunity from polio. It's called a vaccine. We do not have herd immunity from the common cold because there are so many different strains and variants of viruses. So there's rhinovirus, there's coronavirus, there's all these different viruses. We don't have herd immunity from the flu because just like cold viruses, there are multiple flu viruses. So, and they're highly unstable. They transform every year. That's why the CDC every April tries to predict what flu is going to be most common the coming fall. Now, the thing about our current coronavirus, the coronavirus SARS-CoV-2, is that it appears quite stable and it's not mutating rapidly to give us multiple different viruses. And that's why a vaccine may truly become effective. But yeah, this is very interesting with Dr. Atlas. So I'm familiar with Dr. Atlas being in the radiology realm. He was a very well-known neuroradiologist, good researcher, wrote several textbooks that we used in neuroradiology. And I kind of look at it this way. I talked to my wife about it this morning. I can get all wound up and upset and say, oh, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He is obviously a smart guy. And here's the thing that I want to I'm going to bring you off the ledge here, George.
Yeah.
Get off the ledge, man.
Yeah.
As we talked about last time, in the quantum world, the quantum physics world, there are infinite possibilities, and each comes with a probability. So is it possible that Dr. Atlas is correct, and that this, by exposing young people and by increasing the number of people exposed, we'll develop herd immunity? He may well be correct. I don't agree with it, but there's a probability that he might be correct. We know what President Trump does. President Trump, anyone who disagrees with him, he fires him and finds somebody to agree with him. And so I think we just have to ignore President Trump, frankly. Um, it's really easy to get very, very agitated, just like you are. You're angry, you're frustrated. And it's very easy to do that with President Trump because he goes off on rants and tangents, and we listen to him, and that evokes this very visceral, stressful response. So my advice is, you know what? Ignore what President Trump is doing. He is not doing our country any favors, in my opinion. We need to ignore it. And we need to go back to what Dr. Fauci is saying and the CDC is saying. And let's look at examples from around the world. So we can look at New Zealand. New Zealand had basically gotten rid of the virus for over 100 days, and now they have new cases. So it's going to flare again. We can look at Sweden, who tried the whole herd immunity thing, and
Yes.
it's not working out. It's not working out so well. So, again, in the quantum world, and there's infinite possibilities, all with a probability. And so, what Dr. Atlas says aligns with President Trump. You can take that, you can believe it, you can not believe it. But I think we have to look at what are the scientists telling us. And the scientists are currently telling us that, number one, children do get infected and young adults get infected. They're not hospitalized nearly as much. Their death rates aren't as high. But here's this kind of the thing we don't know is what are the long-term consequences of an asymptomatic or minimally symptomatic infection in children and young adults? And there are some preliminary reports, particularly in young athletes, that after a mild infection, a high percentage of those athletes have cardiac abnormalities.
I saw that.
And what we don't know is how long do those persist? Are they permanent? And what other problems can they lead to? So to say, let's just infect everybody and get everybody over this thing, we have no idea of the long-term ramifications of that. And so that's why I would disagree with Dr. Atlas.
Yeah, I saw that study that I think it's out of Germany where there was a small sample size, again, 100 athletes, and they said the heart damage that they were seeing was similar to a heart attack. So some type of a heart attack in these kids, younger athletes, and what the long-term ramification, if they will recover, heal from that or whatever, it is yet to be determined. But my God, that was shocking. Well, here's what I thought. So we got to be informed. You can get any source of information you want. You can get Atlas and Trump and Fox News, or you can go to the other side of the equation and try to get your news from what I consider to be more reputable sources on the other side of the spectrum. But maybe the overall thing that I come away with is coming back to what you talk about, and that is you got to take care of yourself. I mean, first and foremost, physician, heal thyself. Do control what you can control and what you know. And that's what I like about your approach to this.
I would go a step further on that. And I would say you can take care of yourself, but you can also purposefully take care of each other. And I say that because wearing a mask is showing care for others. So it's not all about yourself. It's about the rest of humanity. And we need to take care of each other. And the best way to do that is practice good public health initiatives. Social distancing, wearing masks, good hand hygiene, recognizing symptoms, and helping your fellow humans.
And in the quantum world, as you mentioned, it may even go a little bit further than that. That positive approach to things links us together and may help everyone.
Yeah, like it or not, we're all linked together. And, this is way out there for a lot of people, but not only are you linked to your family, you're linked to your entire human family, which is everybody on this earth. You are linked to the entire all the living species on this earth, and you're linked to the earth itself. And if you really want to kind of go out there a little bit, we have for decades and centuries now been working to I don't want to say destroy, but disrupt the Earth's ecosystem. And frankly, I think that the Earth is not happy with that. I mean, look at the windstorm in Iowa. Atmospheric conditions have changed. Now we have a new pandemic, and we have to be cognizant that these are all connected. Okay, this is not these are not random events. These are connected, and we will all make it through this, and we will all come out better, I think, on the other side. But practice what we know now, and that is what we just talked about. Care for one another through show your care through masking, social distancing, but show your care also through connecting with people. So social distancing should be called physical distancing because we can still connect with one another through Zoom conferences, through FaceTime, through telephones and things like that.
Well, you're a smart guy, obviously, and I know you're interested in learning from this and about this, and the way you do it is through data, obviously, but I'm also seeing stories that are saying they're purposely reducing testing. And I know you had bright hopes for, testing and contact tracing and that type of thing. Are we going to be able to learn what we need to learn via the testing route?
Yeah, I have no idea whether there's a conspiracy. I have no idea. There are some exciting things on the testing front, though. So the NBA is now using, instead of nasal swabs, they're actually using saliva testing and then sending that in. There are tests that are currently developed that are waiting for FDA approval, where you can actually spit on a little strip, and that strip will turn a color and it'll tell you whether you're positive or negative within 15 minutes. That could be a giant game changer. Now, the problem to get FDA approval is they're comparing every test for COVID to what we call the PCR test. That's the gold standard. So a PCR test looks at a little snippet of RNA in the virus, and it tests for that RNA. It's extraordinarily sensitive. It takes about 1,000 copies of the virus for that PCR to become positive. Now, it's very, very sensitive, but that has a downside. The PCR doesn't tell you whether someone's infectious or not. So somebody could go through a course of COVID, after about 9 to 14 days, be non-infectious, but their PCR test could be positive for weeks because it's detecting little snippets of RNA from dead viral particles. So when the FDA is looking at new tests, they're comparing it with the PCR. Well, there are some tests out there where you can spit on this little card and it'll say positive or negative. The thing is, we're not sure of the accuracy, 50 to 60% accurate. That means sometimes we'll miss that virus, but maybe only during a short period of time. If we could have something like that, everybody could test themselves before they go out of the house every day, know whether they're positive or negative, and we could really begin to get some semblance of normal life back. So those things may be on the horizon. We need to do more testing. We need to know who's got the coronavirus and who's infected or not. PCR tells us, yes, you have or have had the virus. What it doesn't tell us is, are you infected or not? Infective or not? Are you transmitting that virus to other people? So there's lots of nuances to all this. Vaccines, there are phase 3 trials right now. Moderna has a phase 3 trial. J&J has a phase 3 trial. So we're going to know a lot more about vaccines in the next 3 or 4 months.
And on the immunity front, I'm just a guy looking at this, and I think about the childhood diseases, mumps and chicken pox and all that, and you'd get that as a kid, and then you'd be free of it, you thought, and all of those shingles, there's something connected to chicken pox, and you had to go get a booster or another shot for that type of thing. But you would be immune for a long period of time, maybe a lifetime, once you had these things. Is that a possibility with a coronavirus, that people could be immune for long periods of times or a lifetime? And I guess my next question is, has anybody that's had coronavirus or COVID-19 been reinfected already? Is it and sickened already? Has that happened? I haven't heard of that.
So again, we don't know how long immunity is going to last. We don't know. The hope is that it will last more than a few months. Will it last a lifetime? No idea. Reinfection. So again, that's an unanswered question at this point. And I don't know of any cases of reinfection that have been confirmed, but the scientists are telling us that's not out of the realm of possibility. So again, we have lots of unknowns, and we can speculate, and we can worry, and we can, wonder what the future is going to bring, but we don't know at this point. And so we just have to take one day at a time, and we have to look today. What do we know today about the coronavirus? As Mike Osterholm said a few weeks ago in an interview, he goes, have me come back in 2 weeks and I'll tell you everything that I said that was wrong. Because we're learning. And and we talked about this before, people have to accept that we don't know this virus. We're learning day to day. And what we say today may not be true tomorrow. And we're doing the very best we can to give people the best advice possible with the information we know today. And people have to accept that, well, you guys said that 2 months ago we should do this and now we shouldn't. We have to accept that. We really do. And again, as I've said before, the only certain thing in life is uncertainty. And we have to live with it. And we have to develop habits to help us live with that. And that's what mindfulness and meditation is all about. Just living in that present moment, accepting the uncertainties of life, but enjoying where we are. So you gave a perfect example this morning. We read news, we read literature, we get incredibly frustrated, we get incredibly wound up. But I've really grown to look at it like Dr. Atlas. If you would have asked me a year ago, I would have been, like, why did he hire this guy? That's insane. And I just kind of look at it now as, okay, the world is what it is right now. Our leadership is what it is. I can't change it, but I can sure live my life without it. And the same thing you said with Congress. Well, they go on vacation. And I happen to look at that and say, maybe that's a good thing because they're not doing much for us anyway.
Not hurting us any.
There's a guy that I've listened to quite a bit. His name is Charles Eisenstein. And he has a whole podcast on politics. And he likens politics as to basically a giant distraction of really combating the true issues in life. And I happen to agree with him. It's a circus, it's a distraction, because we're never speaking of the things that are underlying the actual problem. So let's just use immigration as an example. We always want to talk about walls and preventing people from entering our country, but what's the real reason people from other countries would leave their family, leave their home, pack everything up and come to this country? It's because the economies of those countries are so poor. So instead of worrying about how many immigrants are coming to our country, let's combat the real problem. And that is, how do we help those countries develop economies and ways of life that actually support decent living? But we never talk about that.
Right.
We never talk about it.
Yep.
So politics becomes this giant distraction from the real issues of life.
Yeah, and when they get here, and I bring this point up all the time on my podcast, and when they arrive, you don't gas them, you don't fire hose them, you don't beat them. We tried that back in the 60s. It didn't work out so well. It has a lot to do with the civil rights issues that we still have in this country and the riots that are taking place as we speak. When people just want to be with you and want to be like you, you don't treat them like that because they'll go against you, and who can blame them? Well, Doc,
politics, what we've done over this decades is what Albert Einstein calls insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what we do. That's what our politicians do. That's what we do as human beings. And we have to think differently, because the thought process that got us into these problems is not the same thought process that's going to get us out of these problems.
Exactly. Well, that's well said, Doc. I appreciate you coming on. I feel better. I mean, there's no doubt about it every time I talk to you about these types of things. Is there anything here in closing? I always like to give you the last word. Any wrap up that you want to give us here before we take it out for this podcast?
Yeah, I want to ask people a question, and I want them to answer this question. If you really examined your life and where you are right now, do you truly not feel safe? And most people, I think, would answer you're not safe. We all feel safe. We all have adequate support in this country. Not all of us, but most of us compared to other countries. And so I want people to just sit down and examine, how their life is. Yes, it's changed, but be in this present moment. Enjoy what you have, enjoy the moment, because I think we can. We're all hunkering for the past, but the past is past. The present is now. We don't know what the future is. And just like you, it's very, very easy to get upset and angry. And those are two emotions that will not lead to comfort. Those will lead to only problems and disease.
And you might check out the DeCaf once in a while, too. That probably couldn't hurt me at all. And that takes me, I'm going to read this closing paragraph on a bio that I found on you, and it gets to that. Dr. Nish, he's the medical director of the John Stoddard Cancer Center in Des Moines. His passion is to educate the public and healthcare workers about true health and well-being and how this can be achieved through lifestyle changes, including food and nutrition, stress management, sleep, exercise, purpose in life, and social relationships. And he's working now with what he calls the mind-body connection and how our thoughts and beliefs directly influence our physical and mental health. And that kind of underlines the entire purpose of the podcast today. Doc, thanks for coming back on a podcast by George.
George, it's good to see you. And you know what? Take a few deep breaths. You're going to do okay.
10 deep breaths. Yeah, I get that. That's great. Well, folks, if you like Podcast by George, please subscribe to us on YouTube. Ring the notification bell so that you find out a bit about each and every new episode when it's uploaded. Subscribe on iTunes to get the audio-only versions. That's a great place to listen to them in your car as an example. And, of course, we're on the Google Play platform. Somebody contacted me the other day that was getting us on Spotify and the iHeartRadio app, which I don't think about very often. A lot of folks follow the video podcasts in particular on Facebook, and you can find us there. Just go into Facebook and query Podcast by George, and you'll find us there. But that's going to wrap it up. That's all there is, and there ain't no more today, folks. That's another podcast by George.